Welcome. With that, welcome. Thank you for being here for today's parish meeting. Karin and I have our opening words.
The word courage comes from the Latin cor, which means heart. According to poet Mark Nepo, the original use of the word courage meant to stand on one's core, a striking concept that reinforces the belief found in almost all traditions that living from the center is what enables us to face whatever life has to offer.
To encourage means to hearten, to impart strength and confidence. This is our work as a religious community, to encourage one another, to be bold in engaging the world around us, as well as what scares us internally, to give one another the confidence and heart to live as fully as possible.
With full hearts, we affirm our relationships with one another. We recognize our agency and our connective power, and we accept our responsibility to be bold and courageous.
So may this time together strengthen all that we are, all that we have done together, and all that we will be as our shared ministry encourages those within and beyond our walls. Again, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Here we go. If I start sliding away from the mic, please let me know. I do that often. I'm Joe Kramer, President of the Board of Trustees. Thank you to all for being here. It's going to be an exciting winter parish meeting. You laugh, just wait and see. I'll poll you all after this, whether or not you agree with that statement. So today, just quickly going through the agenda, we're going to approve minutes from our last parish meeting. We're going to talk about our nominations committee. We just need to vote on the members for that. We're going to get an update on the roof and structure repairs, so Dave Weber is going to be coming up for that. We'll have our mid-year finance report. Adam Simcock, who is our chair of our finance committee, will be delivering that. Then we'll be talking about our stewardship campaign. So interim minister Reverend Doug, along with Steve Goldberg, who's going to be our campaign chair, is going to be talking about that. And then after that, we'll be getting into an interim update as to what's been going on during the transition process. And that'll be myself, Kelly, Doug, along with Terry Pepper, our president-elect, who takes over from me on July 1st, which is, not that you're counting or I'm counting, it's 148 days from today. It's been... It's an ongoing joke. It's sort of like if we only had cabaret, I would sing right now as to how many days. But that really, I want to get into that. First, I want to thank all the food haulers for the great food that we have. Always feeding us good food, and that always reminds me of all the volunteers that make this community work. From our children's religious ed teachers all the way to the volunteers on our ministry teams that are out there spreading the good word and doing the good work, along with those that are taking part in governance, such as on the board, on our committees. And I do joke that, my term is 21 weeks and 1 day off, but it has been incredibly enjoyable. So I've been involved in governance for the last 6 years or so, and just continuing to re-sign up for new duties as they have come around because it's fun. It's tough at times, but there's a lot of great learning and a lot of good friends to be made. So if you have any type of inklings of getting involved, please talk to myself or chair of our nominations committee, Rob Savage, with his hand up right over there, past president. And I will be taking over Rob's job on July 1st. So always just please come and talk to me if you're interested. It truly is enjoyable. So we'd love to talk to you about the different openings in the way that you can really express some of your desire to get more involved in the community. So, with that said, So we want to approve members of our nominations committee. So the nominations committee is the only standing committee. Pardon? Oh, gosh, thanks, everyone. Minutes. Yeah, let's get into that. Hopefully you all grabbed copies of the minutes on the back table and had a chance to look at them. So now's the time for us to approve the minutes from our last parish meeting. Do I have any motions? Okay, Rob Savage has moved. Do you have a second? Sandy, I know Sandy Estridge. I blanked. So, all in favor of approving minutes from our last meeting? Aye. All opposed? All right, they pass unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now, here we go. Now we can talk about the nominations committee. So the nominations committee, their main charter is to really go out there and find members who are interested in serving on our governance committees and on the board. So it is the only committee that is voted on by membership. The other three standing committees, finance, governance, and personnel, are appointed by the board. So this is our time as members to decide who is going to help get others involved. So we have 4 people, and past presidents such as Rob Savage and eventually me. We are just mandated to be on, so we don't vote for our positions. But we have these 4 individuals who have offered to get involved, to stay. 3 of them are staying on, and we have 1 new member. So Alicia Anderson, Rachel Weiss, Patty Whitty, and Brian Chanis. All in favor, or no, we should have a motion on this. Gail Bliss. Second? No. Say it again. Rachel Bennett. Okay, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Point of order? Yes, a question. Can you stand up and... Here.
It seems small, and I'm wondering, can we add another person or 2 in May? The racial equity ministry team just found out that it'd be great to have another person or 2, but we haven't even had time to talk about it or ask anybody or anything.
Absolutely. We would love to have more people involved. We can have up to 7 people. So with Rob, right now, this gives us 5, so we definitely have 2 openings. And the only stipulation is because, again, it has to be by a parish vote. We can only bring the individuals on at a parish meeting with a vote. So, but yeah, absolutely. If anyone has suggestions on people who should be involved in nominations or even other committees, please let Rob or I know. Yes? Oh, that's a great point. If any of these 4 members, are you here other than Rob? Nope. Sorry. All right, so I believe we voted, it all passed. You good on that? All right. We did vote. What? Did we not vote? Oh, but I didn't do the nays. Okay. Any opposed to? Okay, then the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. You all keep us so on check. That's awesome. All right, Dave. I'm ready for you. Okay. Question is, are you ready for us?
Well, friends, I'm pleased to report the state of the roof is sound. And the state of the prow is excellent. What we've done so far is we have waterproofed and replaced the roof from the loggia up to the obvious break point, and then the weather broke and we went inside. The prow is completely restored to the state it was in prior to the dedication of the landmark building. And that involved adding some steel struts that were removed, that were holding up the glass, and replacing a second layer of glass that was inside. And when you go in there, you can see some reflections. And to me, it adds some visual interest. Of course, you know, I'm deeply involved in this. My other bias is I really think it's warmer in there now. And we've really eliminated all the drafts. Kelly reports the prow is 20 degrees warmer than it was before this repair. All the structure of the landmark roof is stabilized, and that went through without mishap. That was a wondrous experience. It was kind of like building a ship in the bottle, only with 8-foot-long, 250-pound pieces of steel. And it all went in up over the balcony in the back through a little scuttle hole. The ironworkers reassembled it, welded it together. There's strong steel supporting the sag that goes across the widest part of the auditorium. The sag will remain visible, and that's kind of a preservation decision that, you know, we aren't trying to make it look brand new. We're trying to stabilize what we have. The other argument for that is the ceiling is perfect. There's no cracks in it. And Lord knows what would happen if we tried to jack something up to straighten things out. So when you stand outside, you can still see there are dips in the roof, and we'll fix those up from the top side in the spring when it's warm. What's going on that you can't see right now is the roofing company is fabricating soffit vents, custom soffit vents, to let air in at the bottom along the edge and to be as unsightly as possible, you know, be virtually invisible. And they're also unsightly. Well, you know, holes in the soffit are holes in the soffit. You know, we've put them in the shadows, but they're there. The other thing is coming up with creative ways to join the copper together on the seams as they go up towards the prow. You know, we've got that big flat roof goes way up there, and if you look on the edges, and you know, it's worth taking your binoculars, there's a couple of different kinds of joints there, because the seams on the wings form an L. So way out at the tip, there's a joint where a seam comes vertically and then comes into the roof, and out towards the parking lot, it's horizontal. And that involves figuring out a way to fold 4 layers of copper together and make it water shedding and not look too different. And they're working on ways to do that, and they're going to make models that the preservation architect can look at, and we'll work on it with that. So, once it's consistently over 40 degrees, the landmark roof will start coming off and being replaced. Bit of good news is we're still within the budget. We haven't had any big surprises, and our worries about big surprises are pretty much over, because there's not much left to fool us. The engineering was the biggest worry, is getting that roof straightened out and stabilized. And that's it. And I'll be around afterwards. As you can tell, I love to talk about this, and people who need more information, catch up with me.
Thank you, Dave. We really appreciate that. That's good news. I was sort of holding our breath on that. So, yes? Yes, Cheryl. Okay, so there's, for the capital campaign, there is a sign up in the lobby out here, just in, oh, it's in the landmark? in the landmark lobby, just as a way to say thank you. All right, great.
It's a recognition sign. You can sign up to get more money if you want.
Yeah. Nice. All right, finance report. Adam Simcock, who is the chair of our finance committee, is going to come up here and tell us the state.
Sure. Yeah, is this on? Yes, that's fine. A little lower. Thank you. I have a few more slides, probably than everybody else, since there are numbers to show. A little closer. Sorry. So my name is Adam Simcock. I won't say Monica Nolan, which is on the slides. As you can see, we reused some of them. I'm presenting the report on behalf of the Finance Committee. That committee consists of Monica Nolan, myself, Mark Schweitzer as a board representative, Jennifer Seeger-Conroy, Chuck Evanson, Julie Swanson, and Paul Stang. And can I ask any members here to stand up if you have any questions after today? Please feel free to ask a member of the committee. And also, since Monica's been out for a few months, a special thanks to Nick Kern from Numbers for Nonprofits, who's been coming to our committee meetings and reporting on any additional questions that we have about the numbers. So our goal today is to review the financial landscape of the society and the kind of funds that we have and the income and expense accounts that are associated with them. Provide a review of how we're tracking in the current year through the end of the first half of the fiscal year. Any call outs or concerns that we have, and finally an update on our pledges and financial outlook. There'll be time for questions at the end, although if you have something on a current slide, please feel free to ask. So we have three primary funds. There's the capital fund, which exists to really hold the pledges and disperse the money to capital expenses. We have a relatively small designated restricted fund that funds some small special programs, and then the operating fund, which is really what we use to operate the society throughout the year. And I'll go through each of these funds and their states. Just a quick note on cash on hand. This is the money that we have in the bank to pay our bills. About $1.5 million of this is the capital fund. About $250,000 is in our operating fund. The operating fund income sources include annual pledges. The major buckets are rentals and fees, the foundation, parking, and program fees. And primarily, our major expense buckets are the mortgage, which is mortgage and building maintenance is somewhere around $500,000 a year. Our operating expenses, staff and building maintenance, and legal and accounting, and our program expenses for things like religious education and music. So as of mid-year, we're tracking close to budget. We are a little bit over on income, a little bit under on expenses, both good things in and of themselves. I have an asterisk on the income that includes a special gift, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And our expenses, like I said, they're a little bit low, although this can be a function of when things are paid. So it can kind of fluctuate, but that's within what we expect. I mentioned we are over on income, and a good portion of that is an unpledged donation, bequest of around $60,000. And that has been designated for a previously unanticipated roof maintenance issue. So it came just in time. It was somewhat serendipitous. Other income and expenses, like I mentioned, they are variant slightly from the budget, but are more a function at this point of when something is paid for or when gifts come in. The capital fund, again, its primary purpose is to hold funds from the capital campaign and other special gifts, and primarily goes towards capital expenses. It is tracking people are paying their pledges on time. Thank you very much. The expenses are low, but again, this is a function of when, are lower than budget, but this is a function of when things are paid for on the roof and prow. So there are no concerns with income or expenses at this time, and it was great to hear that we don't see any more unanticipated roof issues.
Could you speak up?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Lost that whole last piece. Could you say it again?
What did I say?
It was great. It was great that.
Oh, it was great to hear that there are no more unanticipated roof issues that we know of, which I guess is the definition of unanticipated, but it's good to hear that they're not expected. The designated and restricted fund is gifts that are designated for specific activities. This is a relatively smaller fund. We have 9 funds within that, ranging from $700 to $45,000, and about 6 of those have had activity year to date. And those, the larger ones are the music fund, the art fair, which was a great success, partner church fund, lay ministry, associate minister, and library funds. A pledge campaign update. So, as just a quick reminder, so the way it works, people give a pledge during our campaign, and they pay it throughout the year. Our goal this year was 1.195 million. As of January 3rd, we received 667 pledges, totaling 1.135 million, which is a little bit short of our goal, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Our operating fund year to date seems to have enough surplus in it that there isn't a concern with this year in being able to pay our expenses and pretty much go up with a kind of a zero-sum budget. However, it's a little bit of a concern. We've looked at the last 6 years of pledge information at this time of year, and there may still be some more pledges that haven't been made for this fiscal year. But overall, we're seeing a drop in both the number of pledge units and either a static or a reduction in total amount of pledges over the past 6 years. So that's something that we think we need to look at very carefully in our coming budgeting activities. This year was a fairly drastic drop, and we're not sure exactly what that is, and maybe it's a blip, but given there's been a general downward direction, it's something that we want to pay very close attention to. Yes? So, yeah. No. Yes, that's right. Actually.
The question is there an increase in membership from 14 to today, or is membership fairly level to understand the context what this means for dropping pledges?
Right, and I'm not sure if somebody I don't have the numbers right on hand. I don't believe there's been a drastic drop in membership. Joe, do you have any?
I would say, typically the way we count membership is those that have pledged and associates that do have a pledge on record. So if this number is down, then our membership numbers must be down by the same amount. Or there very well could be members who are staying as members but just not pledging. So that is possible. But the way we do count, it's by who is actually participating in the capital campaign, or in the annual campaign.
Sure.
So this summer, we will be doing what we call a culling of the membership rolls. So anyone who hasn't made a contribution of record in the past, we look at least 12 months out. And if some people, are members, they do not make a pledge because they've asked for a waiver, and that's available to anyone at any time. So people will send an email or will call and say something's changed in my financial situation. I'm unable to complete my pledge this year. Can I have a waiver? Doug and I always say yes. I don't think we've ever said no. We always say yes. So there are people who are members who have waivers for pledging. But everyone who doesn't have a waiver and has not made a contribution in the past 12 months will get a letter saying, in order to retain your membership, we require a contribution of record. And it basically asks them, do you want to make a contribution? Do you want to stay as a member and request a waiver? Or would you like to be removed? So really this summer, sometime in July, early August, we'll have a better sense of, are our numbers really, down that much over previous years? So we'll have a better sense in July. We just had a new UU class that finished up in January, and we had 9 new members. And we've got a good number of folks who are signed up for our April new UU class. So there are people who are joining all the time. But we'll have a better sense of that after the culling this summer.
I was just curious, when you say contribution, would that include other forms of payments besides a pledge? Like, for example, if you buy something at Cabaret?
No. Yeah.
You can still buy things at Cabaret.
Oh, Susan? Right, contribution of record, thank you, Susan Koenig. Contribution of record and pledge are not the same thing. So people can not fill out the pledge form and make a pledge for the year, but some folks will do stock transfers. That's a thing, that it becomes a contribution of record. Sometimes people will put a check in the offering basket. They may not necessarily mark pledge on it, but half of it goes to the outreach and half of it goes toward their record in our database as a contribution of record.
And we do track those separately. Those are other budget line items. So really, if we want to leave kind of any food for thought, it's around that pledge income, seeing somewhat of a downward trend or staying constant over the last 6 years, while at the same time all of our other expenses continue to increase, whether it's healthcare or personnel or building maintenance costs. So it's something that we're concerned about and hope that we will think about as a congregation as we look at our forward-looking budget activities. Any other questions?
Oh wait, hang on, let me run around.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Robin Lowney-Langton. I have 2 questions. One is, I know last year there were a lot of really difficult conversations about the budget, including related to staff and staffing, and if we anticipate similar hard discussions this year, especially given what the pledging numbers look like. And the second question is if you could just refresh us around the timeline for the budgeting cycle, so when things start being built for the budget, if that's already happening now, when the budget forum is, and when we vote, to remind us of those timelines.
Yes, in terms of the response to your first question, we do anticipate tough questions around salaries and staffing in the light of stagnant income, because that is our biggest source of income for the operating fund. And we have not brought staff up to UUA guidelines, and I know it's on the top of mind of many people.
And budgeting timeline? Doug and I are working. Monica comes back tomorrow No one is happier about that than I am. So Doug and I have been starting to plug in preliminary numbers from staff for program budgets, just to start getting that sense. So if you are a member of a ministry team and you are looking at budget requests for this coming year, now is the time to get those to the staff person that you work with. When's the budget forum? I was hoping one of you would know. May 5th, right, Joe? I think it's May 4th? No, May 5th. 5th? I think it's the first Sunday in May. I want to say it's May 5th.
We're back on our normal schedule. Last year we had a little bit early.
Is that the parish meeting though, or is that the budget forum?
That's the budget forum. The parish meeting is going to be in June,
Okay.
on June 2nd.
Okay.
So the 19th and 2 weeks later will be the parish meeting.
So it seemed like I heard two things that were inconsistent. Dave Weber said there was no surprises on the roof, and Adam, I just heard you say that we had a surprise that we spent $60,000 on.
Yes, and Joe may have more detail, but that was not a part of the capital campaign of roof repairs. This was, I think, a leak issue, and sort of.
Yeah, I mean, by a show of hands, who's tired about talking about a roof? So this past summer, what we found out is in our B wing, which is just adjacent to this, and we've had a little bit of leaking, and we knew at some point we'd have to replace that roof. What we found out is because we're going to be placing solar on that roof. Before we do the solar, we have to make the repairs that we were going to be doing a few years down the road, because what's the point of putting solar just to rip it off and to fix it? So we had another roof issue. So that we knew about, kind of. And so, but the great thing is because solar is driving the need to replace the roof now, we're going to be able to fund half of that expense using the solar financing. So solar kind of created a problem and then partially solved the problem. And then, as Adam alluded to, we were scratching our heads, what are we going to do with the rest of this amount? It's $140,000. So 70 is going to be taken care of with solar. And then we had this check come in of almost $60,000, and we're like, it's almost like manna. So we're going to be able to cover this without having to come back out to the membership to deal with it. And it's truly kind of caught us by surprise, but it was known, it was sort of planned for later, and again, it was just driven by what we're doing with solar. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. And thank you to our entire finance committee, because they really go through the numbers and they do a lot of the hard work of looking at it and then come back to the board with just a nice summation. So we really appreciate everyone, and then you're really well represented here. Almost the entire committee is here today. So thank you for all of your work. Really appreciate it, and thank you. So, yes, question?
What fundraising events are scheduled for this year?
What fundraising events are scheduled for this year? Cheryl? Does everyone know Cheryl? That's Cheryl Mellenthine. She is our project coordinator. She'll be up here in a minute we're moving into stewardship, so were you going to come up with Steve? Why don't you come on up and answer that question? Then we'll turn it over to Steve.
Well, we're going to miss my musical introduction of Steve then, though. No, I'm kidding.
Hello, I'm Cheryl. This is my first opportunity to meet a lot of you in person. I've been here about 5 months, and I've learned a lot. And so we have the first event that we have coming up, we're going to talk about that, the stewardship campaign. I call it an event because it has a lot of opportunities for celebrations. And the second event is yet to be named, but it is our spring fundraiser, and the date we've set for that is May 3rd. So that's Friday, May 3rd. I'm sorry. Yes, Friday, May 3rd. And we are avoiding UW commencement. And then we have some other musical events happening in the middle of May as well. So, and as far, I'm planning something for the fall, but I don't have the date, and I'm looking for opportunities to meet with first our spring event team, fundraising team, to brainstorm some ideas for fall as well. Thank you very much.
And I would just say, if you are interested in that spring fundraising event that is Friday, May 3rd, please talk to Cheryl, because she can use all the help that she can get. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm not going to say. I was joking. No, I would love to, but that'd be a mistake. Doug? Yes, Doug is part of this too. So let's bring up both of you then. We're going to talk about the stewardship campaign. We could do rock, paper, scissors. We do that at our house a lot. That works.
I thought you were on, but I can adjust. No, it'll actually be Kelly and I after you do yours. Okay. I didn't understand the order.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, good afternoon, everybody. I have volunteered to chair what used to be known as the annual campaign. And we are in a transition period. A transition period for an organization or for people is to show what we are made of. It's really important. You know, we're not dependent on just one person who happens to have retired. We're dependent collectively on each other. And the stewardship campaign, we think, is a great opportunity to show what we are made of as a group. In fact, when I think of what we're made of as a group, the word stewardship comes to mind. Stewardship to me means collective responsibility for something bigger than ourselves. Collective responsibility for something bigger than ourselves. So we decided we should rethink the annual campaign, both in terms of the label and in terms of how we would organize it. We came up with the thought that we could leverage the power of stewardship to increase the number of people who pledge, as well as increasing the dollar amount. And both are important. They're equally important. Because we need to increase the number of pledgers, no matter how large or small their pledge might be, so that we can look to the future. Because eventually, those pledgers who are pledging at a modest level will have an opportunity over the years, as their situation improves and changes, to increase the amount of their support. So you are demonstrating stewardship just by being at this parish meeting. So this is what stewardship looks like. And it's what stewardship feels like. Feels pretty comfortable, doesn't it? Feels pretty natural for all of us. So you could say I'm preaching to the choir. What better place to do that than right here? And let's talk a little bit about what comes next. We want to raise money. You want to be able to say we are financially stable, that we can afford to continue funding the programs, the staffing, and the other things that make this place what it is. But we're not just trying to raise money. We're trying to make it possible for First Unitarian Society to really thrive. It's already thriving, but we want that to continue and maybe even to expand and get stronger. So because of the stewardship you've already shown and demonstrated by your past financial support of First Unitarian Society, and because of what you'll continue doing and maybe what you'll increase and expand in your support, your stewardship, it's possible for this organization to make young people feel valued here. It's possible for this organization to provide holistic family events and programs that help families thrive. It's possible for us to be fully staffed and resourced so that we can continue being a thriving spiritual home across generations. And by our continued stewardship, we can be an even louder voice and greater force for social and environmental justice. Something that kind of sets us apart from a lot of other organizations in our community. And because of continued and expanded stewardship, we might be able to host more community events in this wonderful space, which not only would be a great gesture of community outreach and inclusivity, but it would also generate a revenue stream for us, greater than what we already have, which can solidify our future in terms of our ability to afford to support and resource more programs, more activities that are important to the organization. And a new wrinkle that is being introduced, and stay tuned because over the next couple years, if stewardship is successful, we will be leveraging and using our music program as a community outreach tool, a social justice tool. Those plans are already in the works, but they're going to require successful stewardship. So, what successful stewardship can look like, not that. We hope that at the end of the campaign, we'll be able to say thanks to you, and because of you, these other things are possible, things that I mentioned and many more. We are going to be working initially on lead gifts from people who have in the past been major contributors, major pledgers. They are the choir for sure when it comes to this kind of a campaign. And we'll be going to them quietly, but quickly over the next week to give them an early opportunity to renew and or expand their stewardship commitment. We've already got $26,000 pledged, and we haven't even started. So $26,000, and we haven't even started. That's kind of like spontaneous combustion. So we want to prime the pump. We want to have early momentum so that when we officially and more publicly launch the campaign, we've already achieved something of a critical mass. And that's not a Catholic term. Critical mass in terms of how much money we've already got pledged, so that people understand this has legs, this is doable, this is about us, and this is how we're showing what we are made of as stewards of this organization. So priming the pump will be important. I'll tell you your role in priming the pump in just a moment. Another feature that we're offering for the first time this year is the opportunity to become a sustaining steward. So sustainers are those who make multi-year commitments instead of 1 year at a time, which is why we're no longer calling this the annual campaign. And we think we'll get used to that as a group. We think we'll get used to multi-year commitments, long-term stewardship instead of 1 year, one episode at a time. No amount is too small to become a sustainer. It could be $1 a month. But if you commit to multi-year sustaining pledges, you are a sustainer. And there'll be different levels available as well. So we think this could be fun. Speaking of fun, excuse me. We're going to give you an early opportunity to renew or expand your stewardship. So if you're a past giver, you'll get an opportunity to renew or expand your stewardship before we open the campaign on Stewardship Weekend, March 2nd and 3rd. There'll be a mailing of the official packet. You'll be happy to know it's a much smaller packet than in the past, because we know, the phenomenon of adult attention span, and we'll make it very readable, very easy and quick for you to digest and to decide, at what level do you want to make your stewardship commitment to help FUS accomplish some of the things that I mentioned earlier. Once you get the mailing, third week or so of February, remember, we don't want to have to call anybody. We don't want to have to call anybody. If anything, we want you to call us with questions, or how do I, accelerate my pledge, and so on. March 2nd and 3rd will be the official kickoff. We're calling it Stewardship Weekend instead of Weekend of Promise. And we're going to be celebrating every week between March 2nd and April 5. We're going to be celebrating in this room by providing a prize to one lucky person who's already contributed. Their name will be drawn out of a hat. They don't have to be present to win. And we just want to have fun. We want to have reason to smile and to be collectively proud and excited about this stewardship effort. Because it isn't that we're desperate or operating from a position of weakness. We're operating from a position and language of abundance when it comes to this campaign. I mean, look at all the fellowship and stewardship energy here and the commitments that all of you have already made in the past. We want to continue that, we want to celebrate it, and we'll give you weekly updates on our progress. So respond right away when you get your packet mailing. Consider becoming a sustainer, multi-years, and get ready for a big celebration on Friday evening, April 5, when we're going to have an opportunity to thank each other for the stewardship that we're showing, and to realize that this is not just an annual campaign, it's a long-term stewardship opportunity for everybody in this organization. New members, older members, members who have pledged before, members who don't even know what a pledge is. Everybody has an opportunity to participate in this collective act of stewardship. So before I sit down, and before the standing ovation, I just want to thank all of you for being a true FUS, a First Unitarian Steward. And that's what you are. I invite you to continue doing that. I look forward to the celebration on Friday, April 5. And who knows, I might even write a song for the occasion.
I'm Barb Avery. Quick question. I'm thrilled to see all of this. I think it's a wonderful direction to go in, and I'm interested in how you are defining the stewardship levels.
Well, the stewardship is kind of a pass-fail. So that we're not saying that unless you participate at a certain level, you're not a steward. So we haven't quite figured out yet what the different levels will be that you can opt for. You can create your own level. You can create your own number of years that you're committing to and the amount. And instead of asking you to renew your pledge every year, we might just ask you gently, are you interested in changing your pledge for which you've already signed up? I don't know if that answers
So
the
the
question.
stewardship levels will all be based on how long of a commitment you're willing to make?
Yeah, I don't know if stewardship level is the right term. We're going to give you the opportunity to participate at any level you want over a number of years. So
Right. Let me just be real clear on what my concern is.
Please.
If there is a leveling,
Hold the microphone close.
If there is a leveling within the whatever stuff, if there are different categories of stewardship, I would strongly recommend that they be based on percentage of income rather than flat dollar amounts. And that's really that's the heart of my comment.
Okay, thank you. One more over here.
Hi, I was thinking about this for myself, but I realized maybe it should be brought up to you because I'm sure a lot of other people are thinking of it too. Because of the recent changes in the tax laws, we're probably inclined to make a contribution every second or third year, right? And then itemize rather than not itemize every year. And if you built that in formally, just saying, okay, my contribution is for 2018-19 or 2018-19, even 20. I think that would be attractive. That way you don't have to try to explain it later on why you're not giving it all the next year, right? You're just doubling or tripling up.
Yeah, I hear that, and we've talked a little bit about that, and one one aberration in timing fits right into your question and right into your suggestion. And that is FUS is on a fiscal year, not a calendar year. So you would have a chance in your off year to make a donation. You would have a chance, say, to make one in 2019 and in 2020, but that would count towards one fiscal year contribution. So that's a possibility to look at. We know that there are going to be some timing issues for people. That's another reason for having multi-year commitments.
So is there something that people will be able to check and say, this is a 2-year commitment revision?
Yes. Yeah. Good point.
Steve?
Yes. Dorit.
So I may have misunderstood. The only category I thought I heard was if you make a pledge for more than 1 year, no matter how much that pledge is, you would be a sustaining steward.
Yes. Yes. So the key is the long-term nature of the commitment being even as important as the amount. Yeah. But we're open to suggestions. If you have some thoughts that you'd like to share with us, Cheryl is probably the point person for that. And send her an email, and she and I work closely together to figure out what to do next. But thanks, everybody. See you April 5.
Thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate that. Now we're ready for Reverend Doug and Kelly.
And gang.
And gang.
The entire gang.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you, because I think Kelly, why don't we talk about our stuff as part of the interim? Because it really is. Okay. It doesn't really follow.
Okay.
Great. All right, so during the initial few months of the interim period, it's been great watching this team develop. Because really a major focus of the board has been really keeping tabs on the transition and sort of the overall process and what has been going on. And it's actually been really enjoyable because we have been able to really think about our community. We've been thinking about where we came from, where we are right now, and where we want to go into the future. And after a successful and long ministry, we are just starting to scratch the surface. There's just a lot of things we really want to think about. And it has been really an enjoyable time to really reflect on the past again while looking towards the future. It's almost as if we have a fresh canvas from which we're going to be able to paint on without any type of distraction. So we have much to consider and decide, and all of which leads to the point that we're all focused on, and that's calling a new minister. So if we want to have the best chance of finding the right person, it is best if we become better acquainted with ourselves, explore different options, really spend time, think about how we minister to each other and to the outside world, and decide how we want to govern and run our congregation. There's really an awful lot of discernment that we want to do. So, and after we feel settled and have a better understanding really of ourselves, then we're able to start formulating what type of person we're going to be wanting to call. Terry?
I will now lower the mic at comical distance. All right. So one of the rewarding parts of a time of interim ministry is this chance, as Joe was talking about, to step back and just reflect on how we want to be in shared ministry together as a congregation. If you had the chance to hear Reverend Doug's sermon last week, or maybe if you read the article from the transition team in the newsletter, you might be familiar with some of the themes that are beginning to emerge as priorities for this interim work. So also in recent months, the board has been looking ahead to understand the process that FUS will undertake to search for our next called minister. While many of us were anxious to get into these details of the search process, the interim time so far has also revealed a number of opportunities for reflective work that will both better position us to carry out the search itself and also to be attractive to potential candidates. So to allow space and time to focus on the internal work without the pressure to move immediately into the search process, the board has actually decided in our January meeting to extend the interim period for 1 full year. So Doug and Kelly are going to discuss in more detail the rationale behind this decision and talk about the benefits of extending the interim time from 2 to 3 years.
So there are several things actually that we want to talk about quickly with you. One is that when we began to work together, one of the things that we started with, before I actually even got here, one of the charges that I was given was to work with Kelly in terms of her doing some discernment around her own ministry and what her future would look like. And so we began, I asked her about that before I even accepted the position. And so we talked about the importance, she talked about the importance of getting a sense of what is possible in the congregation in terms of their understanding of the sharing of ministry amongst the clergy. And so you all have had a long-standing 30-year model of that has been a very significant and powerful model. And so her first concern was what is possible in terms of the larger congregation and their vision of what they expect from their clergy team, and what is possible in terms of it being more collaborative and more of a shared ministry within the clergy team that then moves out into the rest of the community. And so the first thing that we have been doing since we have been here is to experiment with the idea of Kelly and I sharing the ministry more. And so we first came in before you in terms of the worship team and presented a model that really took Drew, Karin, Kelly, and I, putting us in front of you more often in terms of what happens in worship. But behind the scenes, Kelly and I have been working just to try to figure out how to sort of balance out and to practice without making it official, really seeking to share more of the power in terms of how we work together as clergy. And so we have been experimenting with and making major decisions. We are in conversation with each other. And if someone approaches us for less major decisions, that both of us are empowered because we've been in conversation with each other to make decisions, and if in doubt, we would just say we need to check in. And so we've begun that work, but one of the first things we realized and that you need to know is that if you move into the search in basically 2 months, the congregation and you will need to know what that new model of what that new relationship will look like. And Kelly will need to have moved beyond the 17 or so years that she's had here with a vision of what it would look like. And first of all, when we talked about it, one of the first things that became clear was that we need some time to really explore with the congregation, with Kelly herself and her own discernment process, with other congregations that are about this size that have had successes in different models of clergy cooperation. And so the first thing that we realized is that if you continue with the current model, then we basically need to rush to a new model that is outside of the 30 years experience that you have, which in and of itself sounded like a pretty catastrophic thing to move towards. The other thing that we also realized is that if we search now, as you just looked at in your financial situation, you have gradually lost financial strength over the last 5 or 6 years. And that has made a significant impact in staff salaries, the number of staff that you have, and in their staff development opportunities. And so if you went into search right now, any minister who is really good at what they do will really case you very carefully in terms of how you're spending money and what sort of indicators there are for future success. And so if we went into it right now, what they would see is that your staff has decreased. Your salaries have not kept up in almost every case in moving them towards fair compensation, and probably long-term most damaging, you have the lowest levels of staff development funding that I've seen in any congregation right now. I mean, it's just a reality. I don't even mean comparative to the size. I mean the actual dollar amounts that your staff are given to continue to do their job. So those things in and of themselves said to us, this is an important time for us to work as a larger congregation on trying to move in a direction that is more consistent with what's possible for this congregation. We know there's a lot more generosity that is present, and Steve is very excited about helping you explore that. We also need time to explore what it looks like for us to share the ministry and to discover with you what important things we need to address. And the other thing is that this is an important time for us to explore who you want to be to the larger community. While you have had some relationship with the community, in the last few years, in many ways, that relationship has focused more and more internally. And so this is a time in interim ministry for us to explore what you hope for in the future in your relationship, first with Madison, but also as one of the larger congregations in the Unitarian Universalist world. And what it means to be larger and what it means to be a resource congregation that in some way takes the lead and shares your resources with the larger movement. And Kelly actually talked to the board as they were thinking about this and weighed in. So Kelly, just say a little more about what you're thinking in terms of your experience.
Okay, thanks. So I first heard about this, a 3-year interim, when I went to the interim training that was put on by the Interim Ministry Network, sponsored by the UUA, back in August. And one of our facilitators started talking about, she's currently an interim, and she had said, I'm talking with the congregation now about the possibility of a 3-year interim. And my first thought was, what kind of crazy talk is that? Because in my mind at that moment, it was like, okay, we've had change, we're going through change, let's get our permanent person and make this stop, right? And so then I started listening to the priorities that Doug has laid out for us for the coming 2 years, if we stick with the 2-year model, so the coming year and a half. And when I looked at that, and at one point, I will admit, I called Karen Gustafson, who many of you remember, and left here and became an interim. So she's aware of this, and I just said to her, what's this 3-year business about? And you may remember that she would preach often on the work of William Bridges, who wrote a book called Transitions. And she said, well, don't you remember what I used to say? That what William Bridges says is change is situational. Transition is how you adapt or adjust to the change. And so our situational change is that our minister of 30 years retired. The transition is how are we going to adapt to that change? And part of my discernment about my future work here is really listening to you. Who do you want this congregation to be in the future? What is your vision? What do you value? Where do you want us to go? Where do you want your ministers to focus? Because to do any honest discernment of my own, of what is my role in that, I need to know what you want to hold on to, what you're willing to let go of, what you're willing to change. And that's the information we need to do. And when I think about it, I don't feel that we can do that level of thinking in the next 2 months before we then start pulling a team together and start pulling together our information to say, this is the person we're looking for. Because we've thought deeply about who we have been, and we've thought deeply about where we want to go, and we're really confident in the direction of where we're headed. And so this is the person we want to come and help lead us to do that in the next 2 months. And I really want us to make this not just situational change that our minister retired. I really want us to do that deep work of transition, to answer those questions and to take that breathing space. Because what happens as soon as we have a search team together, our energy is going to move in that direction. And so our energy will shift away from the who are we and where do we want to go as a congregation. And it will go to, awesome, who's coming next? And so I don't feel that we're ready to do that energetic shift yet in the next 2 months to focus on our next person, because really the energy will move quite drastically into just looking at that search process.
In the fall, this upcoming fall, that would be your primary focus as a congregation. And so more and more congregations, it isn't a statement at all of weakness. It is that many congregations have begun to discover if they really want to move into the new era in a place of strength, then they need at least another year. But another year really allows them to make some significant changes that will attract a much broader range of strong candidates than if they rushed quickly forward. The other thing, Kelly, is you said a little bit about just your experience of this time of change and what it's been like for your ministry, because I know a lot of people have been very curious about how the change has affected you. And so you said some things to the board, and we've talked quite a bit about it. Would you be willing to say just a little bit about? No? Okay. Never mind then. Say a little bit more about what your experience has been of us beginning to work together and what that makes you think about your future of ministry, because I think that's an important part of what we want to explore in this time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. It's absolutely fascinating to work with Doug. So after you can imagine, right? After 17 years with one person, day in and day out, and Doug's different. Did you notice? Has anyone raise your hand if you notice that Doug's a different person? I'm just wondering. Okay. So I feel, I can only speak for myself, so the other staff in the room, shake your heads if I'm totally off base. I feel that the staff is feeling empowered in ways that they haven't in quite a long time. The staff themselves are feeling stronger as a collaborative team. Doug and I doing a lot of the day in and day out work together, modeling that from the two of us. It's really modeling for the whole staff of how to, we've been talking for, I don't know, since I was born, about the silos that we have between our programs. And we've always been talking about, we need to break down the silos between our programs, and we need to get staff working together. And that's happening now. And I think that a large part of that is watching what a shared clergy team, how that can, and I don't know if you felt the difference in worship, and part of it is we're having fun. And it's an amazing phenomenon to be talking about worship on the level that we do now, and to think about, well, tell me a little bit more about what you think you're going to talk about, and then I'll tell him a little bit about what I think, and hopefully you're feeling the cohesiveness in those services and just the beauty of collaboration in terms of giving you all different access points into a theme of a month coming from different experiences and different views. But we're hoping that you're feeling that collaborative nature in all of the work that we do, and especially in worship services. So I think that beyond just the fact that I'm having a heck of a lot of fun right now. I feel like I think that's true for our larger staff team as a whole as well. You know, this week we were closed on Wednesday with the schools, but we did our staff meeting by Zoom. We had never done anything like that before, and it was just a riot because we're all in our homes and we're showing each other our pets. And we're saying, Cheryl, your couch looks really comfy. Show me that pillow. You know, and it was just, we're getting to know each other in ways that we haven't, even some of us that have worked together for a long, long time. And so I feel like the benefits of this experiment are spreading out a lot farther than just the clergy team, but to the staff team as a whole.
So in the next, our priorities are this, that we will continue to work on not just with the staff, but with the congregation at looking at models of clerginess, of how the clergy team might look and what power and authority in shared ministry would look like. We will continue to work with the staff to increase morale, to do what we can to pay them better and to support them as an important resource in their development. We'll work with you in terms of doing shifts in your culture of generosity and just how you think about what is possible with time, talent, and financial resources in the congregation. And then finally, we will really work with all of you on thinking about what you want to do in the future out in the world, how you want to be a force in the world and be in deeper relationship with this community and with the larger Unitarian Universalist community. So that's what our vision is for the coming months as we work together. So that's.
So thank you for this proposal. Am I assuming correctly then that you are willing to commit an extra year to us? Wasn't your original contract for 2?
We don't know the answer to that yet. If at all possible, that will be true. The decision is actually just larger than ours because it used to be the case because that there was a model that basically at the end of 2 years, no matter what, the current interim minister would leave and a new person would come in. But since it more and more often has become a standing thing that more and more congregations are finding that the 3rd year is essential for their best success, then it's on a case-by-case basis. So what we would decide, the new model is also that every year we reconfigure about how is it going and am I the best minister for what you want to do and am I going to do the best work with you? And so we would do that anyway at the end of this year and at the end of every year. And so the short answer is it is possible the decision is larger than mine because the transition office ultimately can say they can't force me to do anything, but they can have me not do something. And so they could say, actually, we need you to do something else. That does not happen as much. If at all possible, and if I'm the right guy for the job, I will continue with you until as long as we're doing good work together. No, not forever, not even close. But anyway, so I don't really know the answer yet. No one else does because this is so new. We'll figure it out. But if at all, it is possible for me to do that. We'll see if it's the right thing for me to do that.
Yeah, I had a quick question. It's no secret that the number of staff has increased remarkably, several-fold, since I first became involved here maybe 30 years ago. I'm wondering, is that drastic increase or that sharp rise, is that at all related to the comment you made about there not being enough time for staff development here? Are they related?
Well, there's also been a really significant increase in the number of congregants that show up week after week. And so the thing is that when you are at your peak, both in terms of the number of congregants and the number of staff, there has been some shrinkage in the number of congregants, but there's been a much more marked decrease in the number of full-time staff. And so those ministries have been stretched much more thinly. And just at the end of the day, your budget has been much more thinly stretched. And so one of the ways that in the short term does not seem to impact people is to decrease the staff development funds. And so that is apparently, well, I don't know if it has happened every year, but it's not increased every year. And so now your staff development funds are lower, like what I was originally offered is lower than what I was offered as a half-time minister 30 years ago. So it just is one of those things that gets kind of hidden in the budgeting. But what it begins to do over the long haul is it stops people from having the ability, they have to pay for it themselves if they go to continuing education. Kelly can't afford to go to General Assembly. She can afford one thing a year unless she pays for it herself. And so it's something that you haven't talked about all these years, and that just has to stop. You have to be more honest with each other about what the implications are of what you're doing now, because it's fixable. So that's what I'm talking about, is that you need a certain number of staff to serve the size congregation. You've dropped below that number to be able to balance your budget. And you've also done it by underpaying the ability of your staff to continue to grow professionally unless they pay for it themselves. So those are things that we're going to try. That just can't continue anymore if you're going to be a healthy congregation.
So I'm curious about the models of ministry and what the process would be if we were going to undertake changing that, and whose decision is it? So is it something that the congregation would vote on if we were going to consider not having a senior minister and the titles that we have now, or kind of whose decision is it to consider that question?
Generally, what we try to do is have the congregation be in a conversation about what qualities of shared ministry and what sort of values you want to be embodied, and to get away from dictating a lot of super specific ideas about exactly what the model looks like for a variety of reasons. One is that a clergy-team relationship is one that is ever evolving and very specific to the people involved. And so if the congregation puts forth a rigid model instead of, we want to make sure that the power is shared equitably, we want to make sure that that there is transparency within the clergy team to the congregation about what they want to do with the congregation. We want to make sure that there is more racial diversity in our staff team, including on a clergy team. It is important for the congregation to weigh in on the sort of factors, values, and qualities that are embodied by the team, but I would hope that you would not tell them exactly what model. I would hope that the clergy team would help you, that would share with you what model they are going to try in terms of how they share that energy together, and have the ability to change it as they need to, like any important relationship, to be able to continue to transform it over time so that it remains workable and is real. What happens very often is that if you have a really rigid model, then long before you have changed the name of the model, the clergy team have drifted off into a totally different way of being with each other and feel kind of constrained and trapped by, say, one particular way of designating a model. And so Kelly and I are exploring how to share the ministry, and over time we'll discover more what that means, and try to share it with the congregation. But my conversations with you all will have more to do with what do you hope for, and how you work with your clergy team, how they work with each other, how they work with the world, and have those values reflected in whatever model they come up with.
I just think that it's important that we at some point talk about titles and equity and compensation. I guess that's my true concern, that there's been a pretty distinct pay differential, and if we're moving toward a co-ministry, that we would talk about recalibrating salaries to be equitable for whatever that model is. So that's something I just hope in whatever the space is that would be considered.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, Kelly and I have already, when we looked at the budgeting, we tried to bring everyone up to looking at what it would mean to compensate people fairly in terms of their salary range for what they're doing. But if Kelly were to move to a co-lead position, oh my gosh, what was it? It was like $26,000. It was $40,000. It was, what does that mean, Kelly? 46. It was $46,000 more just in her salary. And to bring compensation up is another $85,000. Right, for everyone. And so yes. Now, and we definitely, I mean, in terms of what we call it, in many congregations, the titles continue to change as people reconfigure, but our idea is to move more towards the model that they're, to see what it's like for us to share as leads. But we're also going to see what other congregations have learned and tell you what they've learned, and ultimately it's up to you all to decide what you'll do together. But I agree with title matters, and certainly compensation matters incredibly.
Could you talk about how the process would work in terms of getting input from the congregation, about our future? Do you have something set up in mind how that would work?
Sure, there are actually a variety of ways that it works. I mean, as it is, what we've already had a series of. Basically, there will be a series of meetings that happen all the way through the interim time that include everything from one-on-one interviews to little focus group kinds of interviews to sort of limited large group interactions and a few mass, everyone is invited interactions. And all of them will seek to glean the beliefs that are held by that gathering, distill them down into a few things, and again, like in March, I'll tell you a little bit about what I've heard from you in the initial interviews, and that's part of what I shared in the last sermon. But I'll share that with all of you and say, this is what you told me. Talk with each other about what you hear in that. And so all the way through it, we'll do a variety of different size groups, get feedback from them, take that information and feed it back to you again and again. And as we move closer to the time, say, when your search committee will ask you very specific questions about who you'll be searching for. And so that will be one place that will take that more nebulous information and turn it into something more tangible. We'll do it again as we begin to put together a startup plan to work with the new clergy team. We'll take those conversations about who you are and what you want to be and turn them into some tangible steps that help you understand how to move forward together.
I didn't hear an answer to the question a couple of questions ago, which related to going from a 2 to a 3-year transition. Who is going to decide upon that? And maybe this is a question for Joe rather than you.
So I apologize, maybe I wasn't clear. We made that decision. So we have been letting people know of that decision, because as a board, it was really our discernment around this, and we decided we're moving into a 3-year interim. It was one of those things we did. I do want to just open up about the discussion at the board level. At first, some of us were uncomfortable about that and wanting to really put it out to the parish, but really my synopsis around our discussion is sometimes it's time to lead. And as the lay leadership of our congregation, we decided that this was an important moment where we had seen enough, we understood enough around it, we had really been in the weeds, that we felt it was pretty important to move to the 3-year. So it has been decided, and that's what we're doing.
Can you clarify how was that decision made and when?
That was just at our last board meeting, which was about 2.5 weeks ago. So that was a decision that I threw up on the table, because as we were talking, as Doug was giving us reports at the board meetings, he did mention months ago, back when he started, just so you know, that to us, he was saying, just so you know, there's been sort of this movement within the UUA from a 2 to a 3. I'm not saying we're going to do that, but just so you know, what I found is sometimes it's appropriate to extend it by another year. We won't know about that until the beginning of the year, until January. We were having this conversation back in October. And then when Doug came and really gave his report as we were building up into the January meeting, it became clear that we need to talk about that on a board level and make a decision. Because the time was now to decide. If we're going to stick with the 2-year, again, a number of things we were going to have happen in the next 8 weeks. One of those things was how are we going to put together the search committee and then be ready to start putting together that search committee around the April time frame and to start that process. So it was something that really, given the timing, we didn't have the luxury to think too long and hard about it. But as we really discussed it at the meeting, to us, there really wasn't much choice if we wanted to do it right. Yes.
So I'm happy to hear and observe the discernment that both the staff and the board have obviously been going through. I think what would be helpful, and with the change from the annual campaign to the stewardship, and I'm sorry to see that we've lost members, maybe that's not surprising, but it would be helpful if the staff discerns what the needs are of the organization, given what we as a congregation want to do, and then communicate to us what level. The data must be there about pledging and the amounts over time. Let us know what we need to step up to, rather than just say, step up, but give us some targets. Not,
$25 per person increase over what you've contributed in the past.
Well, here, before Steve, just a second. So that was a great introduction, because that's exactly what we've been talking about over the last couple of months, that what we really want to do and why we're moving to the stewardship campaign versus annual campaign is we want to change things a little bit as to how we do the pledging, because that is exactly what one of the things that was sort of frustrating for all of us was just the timing, where we're creating a budget at a time that we really don't know what we're budgeting for, and we as pledgers didn't know what we were pledging for and what we should be reaching for. So I think, Doug, did you want to?
So is that going to be in the packet that comes to us, that kind of information?
Steve, is that in the pledge? I reviewed them quickly and I don't remember yet.
Not yet, but it's not final.
We could add that in.
Yeah. Basically, the ongoing conversation has to do, not so much just specifically with stewardship, but all of the conversation that we're really trying to shape has to do with talking with each other and us gleaning from that what your vision is for who you are, and for us to really shape our service to you around that vision. And part of our goal in this cycle of the stewardship campaign is to be much more transparent with you all the way through about these are the ramifications of where we are financially, and here are some ways that you can make a difference. So I think there was sort of a belief that doing that sort of said that we were doing something poorly, but it left you without information you needed to know to make informed decisions. And so we want to find ways to empower you by telling you that, though, and not making it feel like you can't step up to the plate. So that's what we will continue to work on, is helping you understand what the implications are, and to be clear about what we understand our job to be about, our shared ministry to be about.
We have the mic right here, and then I can bring it up somewhere.
I think the congregation should have been more informed in this decision to go to a 3-year transition. I feel like I'm kind of in shock right now.
Yeah. No, and I'm not surprised. I was in personal shock and awe when we were starting to talk about it, and as I sort of explored it with past leaders, I'm not surprised. And we all had the same process as we were thinking about that, and I apologize that you all aren't more involved in that, but this was a decision that we needed to make. Lauren?
I want to say that I really support the board's decision for a number of reasons. First of all, it is the board's decision. That's the responsibility that we give to the board. And so I appreciate that the board was courageous enough to take this, to really think about it and to take the step and make that decision. I think that we're doing some things that are going to put us in such a strong position by waiting, by adding another year. Number one is clarifying what it is we want from the clergy. Frankly, if we went out in beginning in 2 months, we really wouldn't know that, and that is not a strong position from which to draw on the ministerial pool, on the pool of people who would be interested in coming. So I think the time of discernment, of figuring out what it is we want, and the process of figuring out what we want, is really critical to finding the right person. The other is, I am, having been involved in as the co-chair of one of the annual campaigns, I am thrilled at the shift to stewardship. And again, if we're looking at appealing to really, really strong candidates, we need to have that piece really well in control. Ministers aren't going to come to a congregation that is needing to do a lot of development work. This is really development work that we need a couple of more years to work on. So a stewardship campaign for this year and for next year is going to give a completely different message to to people who are considering our pulpit. So I really applaud the board for coming to this decision.
Okay, thank you, Lorna. Yeah, no, that's... And as I opened up the topic, I'd mentioned, and while this is a temporal team, but just watching Kelly and Doug come together and just seeing that relationship grow and seeing it up here, it's kind of intangible, but giving that a little more time, it's going to be awesome. So I hate to rush that process. And truly, as a board and all of us who are talking about this, it is enjoyable, and it's going to be much more enjoyable not feeling rushed. Because if we were rushed and we had to compact everything into the next 8 weeks, it just would not be enjoyable. Trust me. I've been through that. Yes?
You know, I think all of us want our congregation to grow, not only in numbers, but also in, what we want to do, and as you said, what our place is in the larger community here.
And one thing that's been a thrill for me is that I was on the board when we hired Kelly. And I remember the position that we were in at the time and really needing to have somebody quickly and on. And I remember that initial vote, and I was the only person who voted against hiring somebody else. And I just said, no, I cannot vote for that. This is why we're making a decision much too quickly on this person. And I said, I think we need to reconsider. Well, the vote to hire this other person passed. And unbeknownst to me, other people on the board started talking amongst each other at that time, rescinded the vote, and then we have Kelly. So what I'm saying is, I think we really need to spend time to think as a congregation, and for the board to think, and for Kelly and the other staff to think, how can we grow to where our congregation is going? And because I was on the board and with this Kelly thing, I've been so pleased to watch her grow. And I think if we want to keep somebody with the talents and experience like Kelly, we have to be prepared to look at changes in our ministry structure and changes in our support for our staff structure. And I hope that will become clear in our campaign that we're investing in our staff because we're investing in ourselves. And we really do want them to grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? And just to note, we're a little bit beyond 2, so as long as everyone's okay, we're okay.
We might not be as lucky the next time if we were to move fast as we were in getting Kelly, who is a joy, a treasure in the heart of this place.
So you tell us staff morale is up, and that's good. I think we're all glad about that. I think that's a very positive thing. There's this disconnect here between all of us who say we'd like to pay more and more continuing education, but yet we have not only a flat budget, but we have a decreasing gifting unit, so pledging unit. So the question is, what is the congregation telling us? What's the message they're sending us, if they are sending us a message? Are they telling us that we miss Michael, maybe? Are they telling us we don't like this interim period? We want to get going. That we don't know the reason pledge units are down, but I think that's important, because if they're telling us they don't like being in this interim period, then 3 years is not going to be better than 2.
Right. No, it's true. Just 2 points. So we have had this trend of decreased pledges while maintaining our budget. So everyone has been giving more, but there have been fewer of us giving that amount, and that's been there for 6+ years. And that's the reason why we had the growth task force and other things like that. So I think it's important for us to understand that, and then also it's just universally known that in a transition period, you usually have a drop off of some membership. I mean, that just is what happens. So.
That's basically what I was going to say. I appreciated that slide from the financial presentation that showed it was almost a 200 unit drop over 5 or 6 years. Yeah. So not necessarily part of the transition period. Yeah. So I admit the 3 years is scary, but it was a shock, but I agree, so.
No, I like it that we're calling out and asking everyone, what do we want to be? And then we're going to, by putting that together, then we know what budget we need to hit that. And that's sort of how we're changing the conversation.
I do want to say that our experience as interim ministers is that in almost without exception, although there are things that change from congregation to congregation, but congregations that move into this 3-year sort of path, that pretty universally they comment that work really does not put them on hold, that the congregation feels very engaged and very alive, and an engaged, alive congregation tends to be more generous than one that feels like it is sort of in a static place of not growing as a congregation. And so the work in and of itself, while it is true there are people that come and go in the transition time, the work tends to really engage the congregation, and it is rare. There are usually some financial difficulties, but not ones that are inconsistent with what they've actually been struggling with for years. So it typically does not make a major difference. If anything, it just creates more energy to try to handle what has been going on for a long time.
I'm Elizabeth Barrett. I've been feeling that there's more energy here in the last few months. And I also know people who have come back. Now that Michael's gone, they're back. They left for whatever reason. And so it's, we just shouldn't assume that we're just going to lose members and that's going to be that. There's fresh air, there's a window open.
Any other comments? Otherwise, I want to be cognizant that we're running over the time that we promised you all. So thank you. Really appreciate you coming here. Truthfully, this is why we do our work. Thank you. So continue to be engaged and pay attention to what's all going on and help us shape our future.
Move to adjourn.
Oh, we have a closing.
And then our final thing, Joe Cherry wrote, If we have any hope of transforming the world and changing ourselves, we must be bold enough to step into our discomfort, brave enough to be clumsy there, loving enough to forgive ourselves and each other. May we, as a people of faith, be granted the strength to be so bold, so brave, and so loving.
Steve Goldberg, move to adjourn. Second from Dave Weber. All in favor? Thank you, everyone.